3 heads, 3 brains, 1 body, and King Ghidorah can survive losing 2 of them. Stop and think about that for a second. The middle head is the alpha, the one that calls the shots. But the left and the right heads, they think independently. They argue with each other. They have, on more than one occasion, been documented turning on their own body, snapping at each other like 2 siblings fighting over the last seat in the car. This is a creature that is, quite literally, 3 minds wearing 1 golden hide. Now add the rest of the resume. A wingspan that stretches over 150 meters. A body that tips the scales at 100,000 tons. Gravity beams that fire from all 3 mouths at once. And the small matter of summoning Category 5 hurricanes just by flapping his wings. Every textbook of physics and biology we have says this animal cannot exist, and yet, here's the part that should keep you up at night. Almost every single piece of King Ghidorah already exists somewhere in nature. The 3 heads, the regeneration, the independent brains, the energy diet. Biology has built all of these tools before, it just has never been reckless enough to bolt them all onto 141-meter frame. This is Evolved Codex, the series where I take iconic creatures from movies, games, and myths, and reimagine them through the lens of real-world evolution and biology. I'm Dr. Cryptid, and today we are dissecting the Golden Demise himself. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to run King Ghidorah through 4 biological categories: habitat adaptability, dietary compatibility, competition and predation, and reproductive success, and score each one out of 10. At the end, we tally the numbers and deliver a final verdict. And make sure you stick around until the very end, because after the verdict, we'll explore 3 ways a creature like Ghidorah might actually evolve in the real world. And one of them is genuinely terrifying. Let's decode the impossible. Before we touch the flight, the beams, or the storms, I want to start with the thing everyone assumes is pure fantasy, because it's the thing that's most real. A single body with more than 1 head is not science fiction. It is a documented, photographed, currently living phenomenon called polycephaly, and it happens far more often than you'd ever guess. 2-headed snakes are the classic example. They turn up in the wild and in captivity with surprising regularity, the result of an embryo that began to split into identical twins and then stopped halfway. Instead of 2 separate snakes, you get 1 body with 2 fully formed heads, each with its own brain, its own eyes, its own personality. There was a famous 2-headed albino rat snake named Wee. Yes, really, that lived for years and was even valued at tens of thousands of dollars. And here's the detail that matters for Ghidorah. Those 2 heads do not cooperate. They've been filmed fighting each other over the same mouse, each head convinced it's the one that should eat, neither aware they share a single stomach. It isn't just snakes. 2-headed turtles, 2-headed sharks pulled from fishing nets, and 2-headed cattle have all been recorded. In 1998, a 2-headed calf was born and survived for 40 days, feeding and moving with both heads operating at once. The technical term for this body plan, 1 torso, 2 heads, shared internal organs, is dicephalic parapagus, and in humans the most famous living example are conjoined twins who share 1 body below the neck while each controlling 1 half and possessing 2 completely independent minds. So let's be precise about what biology is telling us. Nature can absolutely build a body with 2 independent, thinking, arguing heads. That is not in question. Ghidorah asks for 3. And 3, as far as the fossil and clinical record shows, is exceedingly rare. But the jump from 2 to 3 is a difference of degree, not a difference of kind. The developmental machinery that produces a 2nd head can, in principle, produce a 3rd. Polycephaly is real. King Ghidorah simply takes a rare quirk of embryology and scales it into a body plan. That's the pattern we're going to see again and again today. The pieces are real, the assembly is the fantasy. Now let's start scoring. Let's first take a look at where a creature like this could even live. And immediately we slam into the single biggest problem in Ghidorah's entire biology. He is far, far too big to fly. The numbers are almost comical. King Ghidorah, in his modern incarnation, stands around 141 meters tall, and weighs in the neighborhood of 100,000 tons, with wings spanning over 150 meters. Now compare that to the largest flying animal that ever actually existed, Quetzalcoatlus northropi, a pterosaur from the late Cretaceous. Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of around 10 to 11 meters, and weighed, at the absolute high estimate, a couple hundred kilograms. It was the size of a small airplane, and even getting that much mass airborne required hollow bones, an enormous catapult launch from its forelimbs, and a body that was mostly wing and air. Ghidorah weighs roughly 500,000 times more than Quetzalcoatlus, And this is where the most unforgiving rule in all of biology comes for him, the square cube law. When you scale an animal up, its surface area, including the lift generating area of its wings, grows by the square of the increase, but its volume and therefore its weight grows by the cube. Double an animal's size and it gets 4 times the wing area, but 8 times the weight. Keep scaling, and weight runs away from lift so fast that flight becomes flatly impossible. This is exactly why there is a hard ceiling on how big a flying animal can be, and that ceiling sits somewhere around a few hundred kilograms, not 100,000 tons. On Earth, with Earth's air, Ghidorah is grounded before he ever leaves the page. So how do we save him? Because his designers, whether they knew it or not, actually gave us 2 escape hatches. The first is storm symbiosis. Watch what Ghidorah does when he flies. He generates hurricanes. In the films, this is treated as a terror weapon, a side effect of his passage. But biologically, flip it around. What if the storm isn't a byproduct of his flight? What if it's the engine of it? A 150-meter wing is not a flapping wing, it is a sail. It is an airfoil the size of a stadium. A creature that size wouldn't beat its wings like a sparrow, it would ride colossal updrafts, the kind found inside supercell thunderstorms, where vertical winds can scream upward at over 100 miles per hour. Ghidorah, in this reading, doesn't fly in spite of the storm. He summons the storm so he has something to ride. He is less a bird and more a living glider that manufactures his own weather, the same way a sailboat is useless without wind and unstoppable with it. The second escape hatch is even wilder, and it comes straight from the canon's own mythology. Ghidorah is not from Earth, he is an alien. And that single fact rewrites the physics. Flight depends entirely on the density of the atmosphere you're flying through. Earth's air is thin, but imagine a homeworld with an atmosphere like Venus, roughly 90 times denser than ours at the surface. In an atmosphere that thick, the air behaves almost like a fluid you can swim through, and the lift generated by a given wing area goes up enormously. A creature that is hopelessly overweight on Earth could plausibly cruise through a dense alien sky the way a manta ray glides through water. Ghidorah didn't evolve to fly here, he evolved to fly there and merely tolerates our thin, stingy air. There's one more nice touch worth noting, those golden scales. Gold-colored, highly reflective surfaces are a real thermoregulation strategy. The Saharan silver ant, Cataglyphus bombycina, is covered in tiny triangular hairs that reflect sunlight and dump heat so efficiently it can forage across sand hot enough to kill almost anything else alive. Ghidorah, operating in the upper atmosphere, blasted by raw solar radiation with no shade for kilometers, would benefit enormously from a reflective golden hide doing exactly that job. So where does that leave habitat? On Earth, under Earth's rules, he fails. The flight is impossible, and that's not a small footnote, it's the whole animal. But give him his storms and his alien origin, and a plausible niche appears, a high-altitude, storm-riding atmospheric giant. It's a save, but it's a save that leans hard on fiction. I'm scoring King Ghidorah a habitat adaptability rating of 5 out of 10. Now we come to a question that sounds simple and turns out to be brutal. What does a 100,000-ton flying monster eat? Let's do the math the way an ecologist would. The largest predators on Earth, say a big sperm whale, need to consume something like a ton of food a day. Scale that appetite up to Ghidorah's mass, and you're talking about an animal that would need to eat hundreds, possibly thousands of tons of prey every single day just to keep the lights on. There is no terrestrial food web on Earth that could support even one such animal. He would strip a continent bare in a week and starve. As a conventional predator, Ghidorah is a non-starter, which is why the canon gives him the only diet that actually makes sense for a creature this size. He doesn't eat matter. He eats energy. King Ghidorah feeds on radiation and electricity, and weirdly, biologically, that's the smart answer. Here is the real-world precedent, and it's a good one. The electric eel, Electrophorus electricus, is not really an eel at all, but a knife fish, and roughly 80% of its meter-and-a-half body is a living battery. It has 3 specialized electric organs packed with thousands of stacked cells called electrocytes, each acting like a tiny biological capacitor. Fire them all at once, and the eel discharges a jolt of up to around 860 volts, enough to stun a horse, enough that they've been documented leaping out of the water to shock predators directly. Now picture that same architecture, the stacked electrocyte battery, scaled up not twice, not 10 times, but 10,000 times across a 141-meter frame. Ghidorah isn't generating electricity to stun prey. His whole body is one enormous bioelectrical organ built to capture, store, and channel it. And his hunting ground writes itself, the thunderstorm. A single bolt of lightning carries something on the order of 5 billion joules of energy and channels currents in the tens of thousands of amps. For most living things, that's instant death. For an animal evolved as a living lightning rod, conductive golden scales, a body that is essentially a giant capacitor, a thunderstorm isn't a hazard. It's a buffet. By some back-of-the-envelope reckoning, the energy in a single lightning strike could power a 100,000-ton metabolism for hours. Suddenly, the storm-summoning behavior we talked about in the last segment does double duty. Ghidorah calls the storm to ride it, and he calls the storm to feed on it. The weather is his sky, his vehicle, and his dinner all at once. There's one more layer that ties it together beautifully. How does he find the storms in the first place? Through a sense most humans don't even know exists. Magnetoreception. Sharks and rays possess organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini, jelly-filled pits that detect the faint electric fields given off by living muscle, letting a shark find a fish buried in sand in total darkness. Separately, there are entire species of bacteria. The magnetotactic bacteria, like Magnetospirillum, that build chains of magnetic crystals inside their own cells and use them to orient along Earth's magnetic field lines. Life has independently evolved the ability to sense electricity and magnetism over and over. A creature that lives and dies by electrical storms would almost certainly evolve a souped-up version of the same sense, able to feel the buildup of charge in a developing thunderhead from hundreds of kilometers away, homing in on a feeding storm long before a human radar ever caught it. So the diet is clever, and the precedents are real. The electric eel and the shark's electroreception are doing genuine versions of what Ghidorah does. But I have to be honest about the gap. An electric eel discharges energy it generated from eating ordinary food. It does not run its entire metabolism off ambient electricity, because no known biochemistry can capture a lightning bolt and turn it into usable cellular fuel. That last step, energy in, life out, with no actual meat anywhere in the loop, is the part biology has never managed. The pieces point in the right direction, but the engine that converts a megajoule of lightning into a heartbeat doesn't exist. I'm scoring King Ghidorah a dietary compatibility rating of 4 out of 10. Now we get to the category where King Ghidorah stops being a liability and becomes, frankly, a nightmare. Because the three-headed design that seems so absurd is, in combat terms, a stroke of evolutionary genius. Start with the obvious advantage, situational awareness. A normal predator has one brain processing one stream of vision, with blind spots behind and around it. Ghidorah has 3 independent heads, each with its own eyes and its own visual cortex, mounted on long, mobile necks. That's 360 degrees of constant, overlapping threat assessment with effectively 0 blind spots. While the center head fixes on the main target, the left and right heads are already scanning the flanks, watching for the second and third attacker. In a fight that is a decisive edge, it's the difference between a boxer and a boxer with 2 extra heads watching his corners. But it goes deeper than just extra cameras, and this is where the real science gets stunning. Those 3 heads are not slave to one master controller. They are genuinely semi-independent minds, and we know that arrangement can exist in nature because we've studied it in ourselves. In the 1960s, the neuroscientist Roger Sperry began studying patients who, to control severe epilepsy, had undergone surgery that severed the corpus callosum, the thick bundle of fibers connecting the brain's left and right hemispheres. The results were so profound, they earned Sperry a share of the Nobel Prize in 1981. These split-brain patients revealed something deeply unsettling. With the connection cut, the 2 hemispheres could operate as 2 separate centers of awareness inside one skull. In some cases, a patient's left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, would button a shirt, while the right hand, controlled by the talking left hemisphere, unbuttoned it, the 2 halves working at cross purposes, each unaware of the other's intent. 2 minds, 1 body, sometimes in open disagreement. Sound familiar? That is exactly the behavior the films give Ghidorah's heads, and Sperry proved the underlying principle is real neuroscience, not fantasy. Then there's the octopus, which solves the problem of running many limbs at once with radical decentralization. An octopus has around 500 million neurons, but well over half of them are distributed out in its arms rather than in the central brain. Each arm carries roughly 40 million neurons and can taste, feel, and react semi-autonomously. An octopus arm severed from the body will still reach for and grab food on its own. That is a living proof of concept for distributed intelligence. a single animal whose appendages think for themselves while still belonging to one creature. Ghidorah's 3 heads are the same idea, scaled to the head instead of the arm. 3 combat processors that can each react in their own fraction of a second without waiting for orders from a central command. Stack those advantages, and the picture is overwhelming. 3 independent threat-tracking minds, no blind spots. 3 mouths capable of firing gravity beams in 3 different directions simultaneously, meaning he can engage 3 separate enemies at once or concentrate all 3 beams on a single target for devastating focused fire. And then there's the survivability angle we opened with, because each head has its own brain, decapitating one does not kill him. He fights on with 2, then regrows the 3rd, which we'll get to in the next segment. What can actually threaten an animal like this? In practical terms, nothing in a natural ecosystem. He has no predators. His only real competition is another apex of his own scale, a Godzilla-tier rival, or, most chillingly, another King Ghidorah. And in that matchup, the danger becomes internal as much as external, because the heads can disagree about strategy mid-battle, the left wanting to retreat while the center presses the attack. The greatest threat to Ghidorah, biologically speaking, might be Ghidorah's own divided mind. From a competition and predation standpoint, this animal is as close to untouchable as anything we've ever scored. King Ghidorah earns a competition and predation rating of 9 out of 10. A creature is only as evolutionarily successful as its ability to make more of itself. And here, King Ghidorah has an absolutely chilling trick up his sleeve, one that, once again, biology has already invented. Let's talk about regeneration, because Ghidorah's most famous survival trait is that you can cut off a head and he grows it back. That sounds like the purest fantasy on the list. It is, in fact, one of the best supported. Meet the Hydra, a tiny freshwater animal a centimeter long and a relative of jellyfish and corals. The Hydra is functionally, biologically immortal. Slice it into pieces, and each piece can regrow into a complete new animal, because its body is loaded with stem cells and governed by a regenerative control system built around the Wnt signaling pathway, the same fundamental genetic toolkit that patterns bodies across the animal kingdom, including ours. Cut off a Hydra's head, and the Wnt signals tell the wound to build a new one. The Hydra is the literal namesake of the mythological monster that grew 2 heads for every one you cut off, and it earns the name. Now scale up the ambition with the planarian flatworm, Schmidtea mediterranea, the undisputed champion of regeneration. You can cut a single planarian into hundreds of fragments. Researchers have demonstrated regeneration from pieces as small as a fraction of the original, and every viable fragment will regrow into a complete, fully functional worm, rebuilding its head, its brain, its gut, everything. And here's the detail that crosses from astonishing into eerie. Experiments have suggested that regenerated planarians can retain learned behaviors from before they were cut apart. The memory, somehow, survives the loss of the original brain. Apply that to Ghidorah, and the implication is staggering. A severed head isn't a lost limb, it's a seed. Each head is a complete genetic and possibly behavioral backup of the whole animal. Do you see where this goes? Cut off King Ghidorah's heads and you may not have killed him, you may have planted him. One Ghidorah, decapitated, could in principle become 3 severed heads, each regenerating an entire new body around itself, Hydra and Planarian style. You don't defeat this creature by dismembering it, you multiply it. From a population survival standpoint, that is, the single most effective reproductive strategy imaginable, an animal that turns its own injuries into offspring. But what about ordinary reproduction, making a Ghidorah from scratch? Here, the 3 heads suggest something exotic, and biology backs it again. Consider the possibility that Ghidorah is a chimera, an animal formed when more than one embryo fuses early in development into a single body carrying multiple distinct genetic lineages. This is not hypothetical. Marmoset monkeys, genus Calithrix, are routinely chimeric. Fraternal twins exchange cells in the womb so thoroughly that an adult marmoset commonly carries its sibling's DNA in its blood, its tissues, even its reproductive cells. A creature with 3 heads could be the surviving expression of 3 fused embryos, 3 genetic contributors braided into one body. Natural chimerism taken to its logical extreme. So why isn't this a perfect 10? Because every individual piece is real, but no animal combines them at this scale, and there are real costs the films gloss over. Regrowing a head the size of a building would demand astronomical energy and time, and regenerating Ghidorah would be enormously vulnerable in the interim. The every severed head becomes a new individual. Strategy is biologically precedented in flatworms a centimeter long. It is wildly unproven in a 100,000-ton apex. The blueprint is genuine. The scale is the leap. King Ghidorah earns a reproductive success rating of 7 out of 10. So let's bring the numbers home. Habitat adaptability, 5 out of 10, grounded by physics on Earth, rescued only by storms in an alien sky. Dietary compatibility, 4 out of 10, a brilliant energy diet with real precedents, missing the one biochemical step that would make it work. Competition and predation, 9 out of 10, 3 independent minds and 0 blind spots make him as close to untouchable as anything we've decoded. Reproductive success, 7 out of 10. Regeneration and chimerism are real. The building size scale is not. That gives King Ghidorah a final score of 25 out of 40. A solid B tier on the Evolved Codex scale. And I want to be careful about what that number actually means, because it would be easy to walk away thinking 25 out of 40, so he's mostly fake. That's the wrong lesson. Here is the right one. Almost everything that makes King Ghidorah terrifying is something biology has already built. Polycephaly, multiple independent heads on one body, is real, documented, alive right now. Split brain neuroscience proves 2 minds can share one skull and even disagree. The octopus proves intelligence can be distributed across a body, rather than locked in one brain. The electric eel proves a living thing can be a battery. The hydra and the planarian prove that you can cut an animal apart and have the parts grow back whole. The marmoset proves natural chimerism. The Saharan silver ant proves golden, heat-reflecting armor. Every single component of this monster exists, scattered across the tree of life, field-tested by evolution. What's missing is only 2 things. The gravity beams. That's pure fiction, and for now it stays fiction. And the assembly, nature has never bolted all these features onto 141-meter, 100,000-ton frame, mostly because the square cube law won't let it, and because there's no biochemistry to run that engine on lightning. That's the unsettling truth I want you to sit with. King Ghidorah is not frightening because he's impossible. He's frightening because biology already has all the pieces lying on the table. It just hasn't, in 4 billion years, had any reason to put them together in one body. Evolution had the parts the whole time. It simply never built the Stormbringer. Which brings us to the part you stuck around for. If a Ghidorah-like body plan ever did arise through real evolution, 3 heads, regeneration, storm riding, it almost certainly wouldn't look exactly like the movie monster. It would specialize. So let's run 3 plausible evolutionary branches, each grounded in a real organism alive today. Branch 1, the Pacific Drifter. Call it Tricephalus atmosphericus. This is the gentle giant version, and is the most biologically likely. Instead of an aggressive apex, this Ghidorah evolves into something like an airborne whale, a storm-sailing filter feeder. It migrates along hurricane tracks across the open Pacific, riding the colossal updrafts of tropical storms the way an albatross rides ocean wind, and feeds on atmospheric plankton, high-altitude insects, and the electrical energy of the storms themselves. It's not malevolent. It generates weather simply as a side effect of moving its enormous sail wings, the way a whale generates wake. Its 3 heads aren't for fighting. They're for filtering, each one straining a different layer of the sky. The real-world template here is the baleen whale crossed with the wandering albatross, a colossal, peaceful traveler that the world fears only because of the storms it drags behind it. Branch 2, the territorial sovereign. Call it Tricephalus territorialis. This branch leans into the 3-head architecture as a coordination machine, and the model is the cooperative specialization you see in eusocial animals and in the divided labor of the octopus. Here, the 3 heads evolve specialized roles. The left head becomes the threat detector, its brain wired heavily for motion and predator recognition. The right head becomes the weather sensor, its magnetoreception tuned to read storm systems and air currents days in advance. And the center head becomes command, the decision maker that integrates what the other 2 report and directs the body. This Ghidorah rules a vast aerial territory through sheer, perfectly coordinated awareness, dominating rivals not by being stronger, but by never ever being surprised. It's the 3-headed embodiment of division of labor. Branch 3, and this is the one that should genuinely disturb you. Call it Tricephalus dominatus, the head collector. This branch takes regeneration and chimerism and weaponizes them. When this Ghidorah defeats a rival of its own kind, it doesn't kill it. It absorbs the dominant head, grafting the loser's still-living, regenerating head onto its own body, chimera style. Over centuries, a successful dominatus accumulates heads. 5 heads. 7. Each one a backup brain, each one another mouth, each one making the creature exponentially harder to kill and harder to outthink. The biological inspiration is real and genuinely creepy. It's the logic of parasites like cordyceps, the fungus that hijacks an ant's body and turns it into an extension of itself. Taken to a macro scale, an apex predator that grows by annexing the bodies of its own species. A truly ancient Dominatus would be a near-immortal hydra of an animal, a flying parliament of stolen minds, almost impossible to defeat because to cut off one of its heads is simply to hand it another seed. That is how a real King Ghidorah might become, in time, genuinely unkillable. 3 branches. One peaceful, one coordinated, one apocalyptic, and every single one is built from biology that already exists. So that's King Ghidorah, 25 out of 40, B tier, and proof that the line between monster and animal is thinner than any of us would like to admit. The Stormbringer isn't a violation of biology, he's a remix of it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any future content. And if you want to further support the channel, consider becoming a YouTube member today. You'll get sneak peeks of upcoming videos, early access to new releases, and custom emojis of your favorite creatures from the channel. And I want to hear from you down in the comments. Which kaiju should we decode next? Godzilla himself? Mothra? Rodan? Or something from outside the Monsterverse entirely? Tell me which creature you want me to run through the codex, and the most requested one might just be the next episode. Until next time, stay curious, and I'll see you all in the next video.